Hello, my name's James Ransom. I'm Head of Research at the National Centre for Entrepreneurship in Education. In this video, I will be giving a walkthrough of our latest report called Driving Entrepreneurship in Education. It's the University Enterprise Report 2023, which builds on a survey of 50 heads of enterprise in UK universities. So this video will be particularly interesting for you if you want to learn what's changing in UK higher education, particularly in the entrepreneurship and enterprise space. If you want to learn about what the latest opportunities and challenges are facing the sector and people leading on enterprise activity. And if you want to find out what the views are of heads of enterprise in UK universities and higher education institutions. There's a lot more detail in the actual report than I'll cover in this video. You can find the full report on the NCEE website. So if you go to ncee.org.uk, click on news at the top and then publications, and it'll pop up on that page. There's also a link below this video. If you are a premium member of the NCEE, of our Global Alliance of Entrepreneurial Universities, you also have access to a webinar where this report was launched with discussion from those working in the sector. One of the great things about this report is that we track over time a whole load of measures as to enterprise provision in UK universities, going all the way back to 2012. So in the full report, and we'll come on to this later in the video, there's a heat map to see how things have changed since 2012, over 40 measures, and that's in addition to the main questions that we ask throughout the report. However, if you don't have time to watch the full video, do stick around for the first minute or so, because we'll be looking at the high-level top findings first. So we'll jump into those now. So we found this year that 83% of universities have increased their enterprise activity over the past 3 years. We found that nearly 90% of universities plan to expand enterprise activity in the next year. We do, however, find that support for enterprise in local schools has fallen from 57% in 2012 to just 17% today. So that's quite a dramatic fall, and this builds on a trend that we've seen in previous years as well. For the first time, however, all of the universities surveyed embed entrepreneurship in at least some of their degree programs. This is a first this year. We find that university core funds provide enterprise activity funding for 80% of universities. This has become increasingly important, of increasing importance, a reliance on core funds. This is partly because EU funding now supports just 33% of surveyed universities. This is down from 51% in 2012. This may not be a huge surprise to those working in the sector and who have had access to EU funding in the past, but as that has now come to an end, many projects funded by EU funds ending in 2023, we're seeing that reliance on core funding. 73% of heads of enterprise think that student interest in enterprise is growing. As perhaps an effect of this, we're seeing that summer schools for enterprise have more than doubled since 2020. So this is one of the measures that we capture in our big heat map of enterprise provision, and it's quite a notable finding since 2020. So what we look at in the report in detail is how universities have emerged from the pandemic. And I think this is perhaps one of the indications of broader face-to-face engagement that has picked up. And our final key highlight is that 77% of heads of enterprise want government to do more to support enterprise activity. So those are just 9 snapshots of some of the findings from our report. We're now going to jump into the report itself to have a more detailed look. Here's the report. Let's jump first to the recommendations. So, in this report, we recommend to university leaders that you continue to work to embed enterprise in external engagement activities. look for opportunities to bring together the civic and the enterprise agendas. To heads of enterprise, we say continue looking to diversify funding, which we appreciate is easier said than done. We say continue to reach underrepresented groups. There's been progress on this, but there's still some way to go. We say continue to build relationships with external partners, perhaps jointly with the careers group if this is operated separately within your institution, and look to build relationships particularly to strengthen opportunities for students. For sector bodies such as UKRI and the Office for Students, we ask to incentivise enterprise activity at universities, to design new metrics and policies in conjunction with heads of enterprise and staff at universities. To government, we ask to use the government's convening and funding powers to support university enterprise activity and to look to join this up with broader government policies. There's more here for each of these groups, but those are the broad asks that we have in the report. As mentioned, we surveyed 50 heads of enterprise, or the equivalent position, across Wales, England, and Northern Ireland and Scotland. Across the various mission groups as well are all represented. Enterprise activity has grown in universities over the past years, according to heads of enterprise. The green bars here are 2023 data, red 2020 and yellows 2018. So we can see the findings are broadly similar across the previous three surveys. And importantly, growth in enterprise activity has been sustained through the pandemic. We can also compare growth in enterprise activity to social enterprise activity specifically. So we started asking about this in 2020. Green is 2023 and red is 2020. So here, social enterprise activity has grown. There's lesser growth in the increased significantly category here compared to the increased slightly category. It's reversed for enterprise activity in general. However, we were heartened to see that this quite fragile stream of activity of social enterprise has weathered the pandemic and its aftermath. There are widespread plans to increase enterprise activity within universities, as we can see by these strong bars down towards the bottom here. Red 2020, green 2023. So we can see there are plans actually to significantly increase enterprise activity in just under half of responding institutions. Here we ask institutions about embedding entrepreneurship within degree programs. So as mentioned earlier, all responding institutions now embed enterprise activity in at least some of their degree programs. We can see looking at this chart that it actually varies though between subjects. So where 100% of courses have some enterprise activity embedded, it's green. So we can see, and red is 75% of courses approximately. So we see here that entrepreneurship is embedded particularly strongly and unsurprisingly in business and or management courses. It's lower, however, for medicine, healthcare and veterinary courses, as you can see by the purple and grey bars, which are 25% or lower. We asked about additional or elective modules in enterprise and entrepreneurship. 83% offer these. This is an increase from 3/4 in 2020, so a small increase, which itself was broadly similar to 2018 survey. We asked about the proportion of enterprise activity delivered online. We can see that about 1/4 is delivered online for half of responding institutions. Many report that a lot of their activity is hybrid, so they'll deliver things online and in person. Particularly coming out of the pandemic, they report that there's been a demand for more face-to-face provision, so it's shifted back towards face-to-face provision. However, many universities have learnt from the expertise that they built up in online provision. And where they have international delivery, this has survived and has continued to grow as an online stream of activity. We ask about student interest in enterprise. Heads of enterprise think this is increasing. Again, green is 2023, where we can see that 29% of respondents feel that this interest has increased significantly, 44% increased slightly. So this has increased over the last 3 years. Findings are broadly consistent with our past surveys. We then have our heat map, where we look at over 40 measures, and I won't go through all of this in great detail, but we have some analysis of the key trends here. So at the top, we have columns for each of the previous surveys, 2023 back to 2012. We can see where there's a red, the deeper, darker shades of red are where activity or provision is lower across universities. Where it's a darker green, that means the activity is higher. So where it darkens towards green from left to right, where there's more red on the left, it means that activity has decreased over time if it's greener on the right. So for example, with support for enterprise in local schools, this has dropped quite significantly since 2012. We ask also, for example, about social enterprise starting in 2020, and we can see that this has increased from 8% to 19% in 2023, although given these are still low figures, they're shaded quite dark. It's worth having a look through to see how much of this you recognise in your institution as well. Development sabbaticals for staff, for example, have dropped from 40% to 11%. It may be that certain support for staff has been diverted or channeled into other forms of support, or it may be that there's a broader trend at play here. We see that under different categories, sometimes they're more uniformly green. So ideas and planning for students for enterprise and entrepreneurship activity is quite strong here. It's quite a dark shade of green, especially when it comes to workshops and events. And again, broken down for the various areas. Here's one of our headline findings about summer schools, increasing from 39% in 2018 and 40% in 2020 up to 91% this year. We ask about networking events, support for different groups, and we can see that that's actually quite a dark shading here, although there has been some improvement over time, for example, for female students support from 23% to 45%. Core university funds are critical for underpinning enterprise and entrepreneurship activity within universities. So if we look at one of the headline fundings, we can see that EU funding is beginning to decrease over time from 2020 with the red bars to green bars for 2023. University core funds increasing this year. HIFE in England, so this measures the proportion of those institutions from England that report using this, not all responding institutions. We see that actually this has dropped significantly from 78% to 56%, those institutions utilising HIFE for enterprise and entrepreneurship activity. However, it's still a considerable source of funding. An increase in philanthropic and private donor funds, and a decrease in private sector funds. We asked about challenges and enablers for staff leading on enterprise activity. There's been a switch here from 2020, the red bars, to 2023, the green bars. So in our previous survey, we saw that the biggest issue was people. So having enough resources, having enough people to deliver activity. This is now switched. So for 32%, the most significant challenge is actually resources, money. We asked about the biggest enabler in delivering enterprise activity. This is also the same first place as the previous survey. Individuals are the biggest enabler, with the senior leadership team second. And these are broadly similar to our previous survey. We found that 3/4 of head of enterprise want the government to do more to support enterprise activity, 77%. And at the beginning, we talked about some of our asks of government. We also asked about how heads of enterprise are receiving KEF, which has been broadly welcomed. The first two bars here show 2020 activity and 2023 activity in terms of whether the KEF has been welcomed, and we find that it is broadly welcomed. Very few think that the KEF is hindering enterprise activity, although just over a third are uncertain. When we look at the publication of the longitudinal education outcomes data, we find that this is reversed. So many are not sure. Over a third think it helps, and this is actually up from 2020. And actually the proportion that think it's hindering enterprise activity has dropped since our previous survey. So although there's greater uncertainty compared to KEF, we're finding perhaps over time some are seeing the benefits of LEO data. And finally, we asked about TEF, where it's split fairly evenly between those who think it helps, and this has decreased since 2020, and those who are uncertain, which is just under half, around the same as before. A greater proportion now feel that TEF may be hindering their enterprise activity or their provision of enterprise activity. So that's a very rapid run through of the report. We welcome further discussion, so please do get in contact. And as I mentioned before, the report is available on our website, so do look at the link below to learn more about enterprise in UK universities. Thank you.